Greetings everyone. Welcome to the lecture on Women as Doers in Medieval India, Part 2. In this lecture, we shall be discussing several roles played by women during medieval India. So, we can know in detail about women as mystics, as architects, as rulers, as literary personalities, etc. And how do we come to know that all these roles were being played by women? Because mainstream history has largely remained silent. So, for this, we can take recourse to several sources and several non-traditional sources, visual sources like portraits, paintings, etc. Portraits of women in Indian painting were either idealized representations of unavailable princesses, or else they were courtesans who were often depicted holding a flask or a wine cup. No male artist could have had access to the former. The latter, however, were more readily available to serve as models. When we talk about the portrayal of women, so the image of a public woman is far more easily available. The window portrait format was often used for such portrayals of courtesans. This format suggested that they were public women, as does the henna applied to their hands. So, in this depiction, what remains lesser visible were Mughal princesses or the Mughal begums. However, there are a number of paintings that do take into account the representation of Mughal begums also. So, we have a number of beautiful and enigmatic scenes set at night by a lake with a full moon appearing between dramatic clouds, which was typical of 18th century Mughal Zenana scenes. So, most of the women were depicted as bejewelled or richly dressed begums, presumably from the Mughal court, surrounded by carpets, bolster cushions, and sweetmeats, fruits, and attended to by a huge retinue of musicians, servants, dancing girls, helpmates, etc. So, as you can see in this visual that is being shared on the screen, this was a typical kind of a scene that would depict the life in a zenana, and the way a woman belonging to royalty was kind of pampered and taken care of. Then another very popular theme was that of a standing girl, probably a courtesan. Since portraying a woman living in the zenana was not possible, so a large number of courtesans were portrayed in several Mughal paintings. Such images did not avert gaze, but looked straight at the viewer with a certain defiance, which was quite peculiar, and which kind of decided that this was a lady who belonged to the public sphere and probably not to the private sphere. In some of the paintings, a princess who is attended to by her women, and these kind of paintings started appearing from 1620s onwards, and these paintings give details of textiles, physical beauty, grandeur, and all the women's faces were exquisitely modelled and expressive, and all of them would be looking towards the princess. And by the end of Jahangir and the beginning of Shah Jahan's reign, a large number of such paintings started appearing, which also captured details of dress, jewelry, finery, etc. as you can see in this painting that is being showed on the screen. Now, as we talk about the Mughal school of paintings, we also must keep in mind the regional schools of art, because with the decline of the Mughal Empire during the 18th century, several court artists moved towards east to the rich Muslim kingdoms of Awadh and Bengal, and then there were several Rohilla principalities in western Awadh in the later 18th century. Then there was Farrukhabad, which had a school of painting that was influenced by the artist Muhammad Fakirullah Khan, one of the artists who had left Delhi around 1760. So, a large number of paintings capturing different scenes. For example, a painting depicting a writer's party scene, which showed a prince who stumbled upon a writer's party, and the scene depicted sensuous pleasures, consumption of drugs, and couples having fun. So, in this painting that is being shared, this belongs to Awadh and Farrukhabad, and developed somewhere between 1760 to 1770, which can give us an idea of the kind of life that must have been for women in the public domain, or probably those belonging to not belonging to the royalty. Then another important school of art, that is the Rajput art. Rajputs also explored themes of love, romance and longing through their art. The artists around this era largely painted scenes from the mythology depicting the romantic relationship between Radha, Krishna, as well as the presence of gopis. So, the role of women as consorts of men was also largely captured in several of these art forms. The elegance and the richness of royal inheritance, which depicted women as pure and chaste, designed in poetic beauty, and also placed in castles adorned in jewelry and colorful clothes. All these were some very favorite themes for Rajput art, and most of their faces, of the faces of Rajput style of painting, had very thin eyes, long sharp nose, slim built, and expressed the women with magnificence, virtues, and a very fanciful kind of a perfection which was far from reality. Now, the royal tastes were also explored through the actions of the ladies. So, for example, smoking hookah or playing holi or simply smelling a flower. These were also some of the very popular and common themes in most of the paintings. Gods or kings were also a common feature in this kind of a painting, reflecting the bonds of family and power equations among relationships. The Mughal period also registers the painting of a Mughal woman holding a veena, suggesting a very smooth amalgamation of cultures as well as communal harmony. When Mughals kept their women behind the parda, Rajput women were often depicted with a very thin, transparent veil covering their head and some part of the face. As has been pointed out by Ruby Lal in her book Empress, there has been a tendency to overlook the powerful role that was played by women during the medieval period and also during the Mughal dynasty. So, Ruby Lal has kind of rescued Nur Jahan from patriarchal and orientalist cliches of romance, intrigue, etc., and she has explored the lives of women and girls in the Mughal Empire, even where scholars claim that there are no sources. So, the sense of a historian, and that too of a feminist historian, lies in the sense that we unearth the available sources, we kind of read in between the lines, and there is some kind of a revisionism that is attempted in order to explore the lives of the marginalized sections of society. So, Nur Jahan, who was born in 1577 near Kandahar in present-day Afghanistan to eminent Persian nobles who had left their home in Iran amidst increasing intolerance during the Safavid dynasty to seek refuge in the more liberal Mughal empire. So, that was the kind of background to which Nur Jahan belonged. The term Ruby Lal has used to describe Nur Jahan and her accomplishments is incredible. So, it was Jahangir's 20th and favorite wife Nur Jahan who was to become undoubtedly the most famous, influential Mughal noble woman. A widow in her 30s when she married the emperor, her rise to power was swift and it went beyond any illustrious empress before or after her. So, the kind of charisma, political talent, ambition and dynamism that Nur Jahan displayed made Ruby Lal describe her reign as incredible. Another great achievement that can be ascribed to Nur Jahan was that of her being a co-sovereign. She was a co-sovereign of the empire for a large part of Jahangir's reign, with the charge of the imperial seal as well as her own imperial orders. She had even power to hold court when Jahangir was unwell or was otherwise occupied, and there were coins that were minted in her name, that too when the emperor was very much alive. So, all these were accomplishments that indicate the multifaceted personality of Nur Jahan. She not only wrote poetry, but she also designed clothes, gardens, buildings. She was a formidable rider, a sportswoman, a prolific trader and an expert on textiles, and she was also an extremely good hunter. She was known for killing several man-eating tigers, and there are paintings that also capture this reality. For example, her being an accomplished hunter is captured in one of the paintings that is being shown on the screen. Now, there is a story behind her being such an accomplished hunter, that in the autumn of 1619, when the royal cavalcade of Jahangir and Empress Nur Jahan set out from Agra, which was the capital of Mughal India, and they were headed for the Himalayan foothills. It was at that time that some villagers approached Jahangir that a tiger had been attacking villagers, and then would evade the local hunters. So, the local hunters were not really able to kill the tiger, and killing the tiger in any case had been the royal prerogative. So, Jahangir was approached, but Jahangir had taken a vow to give up hunting when he turned 50. So, it was now the empress who was prepared to protect her subjects, and Nur Jahan lifted her musket, aimed between the animal's eyes and pulled the trigger and killed the man-eater instantly. So, after this scene, Jahangir was delighted. A woman shooting publicly was highly unusual, and with such expertise was unheard of. So, Nur's shooting skill was not the only thing that made her highly unusual. She held a position in the empire that never before was filled by a woman, and that was the position of a co-sovereign. And why was she able to do that? How come she was able to accomplish so much? Because she was capable to manage court politics. For more than a decade and a half, from a few years after their wedding until Jahangir's death, Nur Jahan ruled along with her husband effectively, prominently, successfully, and then she was also managing feudal courtly politics as well as the male centered culture of the Mughal political world. So while she was conducting government business, she issued her own imperial orders, and coins of the realm bore her name along with her husband's. In Islamic thought and practice, the edicts and the coins were convincing signs of sovereignty, and Nur Jahan was clever enough to know this, and so she wanted to exercise sovereignty in her own right. She sat where no other Mughal queen had sat before or would after, that is in the Jharokha, which was an elaborately carved balcony projecting from the palace wall, from which most of the government business was conducted. So by appearing or by sitting in Jharokha, she made an emphatic statement that she meant business and she was not to be merely considered as the wife. The subjects gathered below the Jharokha to pray for her health and for getting a look at her, which was considered auspicious. The nobles would also present themselves below the imperial balcony and listened to her dictates. According to contemporary historian, at last her authority reached such a pass that the king was such only in name. Repeatedly he gave out that he bestowed the sovereignty on Nur Jahan Begum. So this was how the contemporary Muslim Mughal chroniclers remembered Nur Jahan, thereby robbing her of all the good work that she had done or all the authority that she wielded because of her capability and not because she had been bestowed all this power by Jahangir. In fact, Nur Jahan should also be remembered as someone who broke several barriers, because if we go back a generation earlier, then Jahangir's father Akbar had ordered all royal women, whether they were wives, daughters, concubines, to be sequestered behind harem walls, calling them the veiled ones, the Parda Nashins. Whereas 3 decades later, we have personality like Nur Jahan, who was publicly appearing and displaying a new kind of power. So as has been pointed out by Ruby Lal, this clearly was a case of breaking barriers, and that too within 3 to 4 decades of the kind of norms that had been set by Akbar. Now there are several portraits of Nur Jahan and in most of these portraits Nur Jahan is seen accompanying her husband Jahangir on his own elephant, and they were followed by a long line of courtiers. Then portraits of Nur Jahan from the period suggest that she was wearing a regal turban, much like the ones favoured by the emperor and other distinguished noblemen. But it was highly unusual for a woman to wear a knee-length tunic with a sash around the waist over tight trousers. So the dress style, the dressing style, the attire also kind of indicated power. That also kind of indicated that she was not to be considered as feminine or as powerless or only as a beautiful form. And at 42, she was still praised by her contemporaries for her luminous beauty. A number of portraits in which Nur Jahan is portrayed clearly capture the kind of aura and power that she displayed. And she could be described as a gun-wielding queen, a remarkable leader in a male-dominated world. She did not come from royalty, yet she ascended from the emperor's harem to great heights as an astute politician and one of the favorite wives of Jahangir, ruling over the vast Mughal empire as a co-sovereign. As you can see, in this visual representation of Nur Jahan the kind of dress she is donning. You can see the similar kind of dress was being adorned by the emperors or by the Mughal noblemen. So she did not want to be to appear in her public avatar as only a feminine beauty or only as an empress. This dress in itself displays power, her ability to wield a gun which was as long as herself, and the kind of aura that the kind of body language that this painting depicts clearly makes us believe that definitely here was a queen who was no less than the king. So what we kind of decipher from such visual representations, the several aspects of ambition and power. How did she become so powerful at a time when women rarely occupied or appeared in the public realm? So was it her upbringing or the supportive network of men and women around her, or the special relationship that she enjoyed with Jahangir, or her own ambition? So she can clearly be described as a sovereign Begum, because soon after their marriage she issued her first royal order to protect the land rights of an employee. Her signature in the order read Nur Jahan Padshah Begum, which translates as Nur Jahan, the Lady Emperor. It was clearly a sign of sovereignty and an indication that her power was growing day by day, and there was a need to display that and to let others acknowledge that power. Then one also comes across some acts of defiance, as one courtier described an incident where she surprised many by appearing in the imperial balcony, which was reserved for men only. So whether it was hunting or issuing imperial orders and coins, designing public buildings, or taking measures to support poor women, or championing the disadvantaged, she did not think twice before attempting certain acts of defiance. Nur lived a life that was unusual for her sex and times. She also led an army to save the emperor when he was taken captive, which again was a very daring act, which ensured that her name was etched in public imagination as well as in history. Now, when so much had been accomplished by a woman, a question that one can ask, that how was she described by the contemporary sources? What was the approach of the Mughal chroniclers or the contemporary thinkers, scholars, writers? So we can here give example of court historian Inayat Khan, how he described Nur Jahan upon her death. So what he wrote went as like this: she acquired such unbounded influence over His Majesty's mind that she seized the reins of government, and assuming to herself the supreme civil and financial administration of the realm, ruled with absolute authority till the conclusion of his reign. So such a negative, summing up of the entire history, that it was, that she acquired unbounded influence, not a word in her praise that she was such an accomplished personality. She was such a capable person, and she had all the qualities to wield the reins of government, and there was nothing like seizing the reins of government. Okay, so and assuming to herself the supreme, again assuming to herself the supreme means as if she snatched something which was not rightfully hers. However, on closer examination, one realizes that there were several exceptions associated with Nur Jahan. and it is not improbable that originally her portrait was taken from life. Okay, because she was frequently appearing in public. So while the other Mughal princesses faces had to be imagined by the painters or the portrait makers, here there was a queen who was readily available, and she used to make her appearances also in public. So while the male artists could use some of the pictures of family members for reference, and you just imagine the kind of likeness of physical features or facial features of several of these princesses. Probably this was not the case with Nur Jahan. The depictions of princesses were idealized types. They were based on sketches from other sources or the imagination, thereby neglecting individuality of many of these remarkable women. So, having discussed all these aspects related to women belonging to royalty, women belonging to the medieval period, whether it was Sultanate or it was the Mughal Empire, I think a lot of scope is still there to know more about such incredible figures. Thank you.